कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन प्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन प्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारि यमुना तीरा वनचारि हे राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जीवं विष्णुपाद ब्रह्मं च परमदक्ष श्री श्रीमती सोम श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। जीवं विष्णुपाद ब्रह्मं च परमदक्ष श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जीवं विष्णुपाद श्री गौर किशोरदास बाबू महाराज की जय। जीवं जय श्री रूप सनातन की जय। जीवं विष्णुपाद श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जी गोपाल भक्तदास षट गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य दास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से गो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिगोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बेंगलोरेश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंद की जय। समावेद भक्तवृंद की जय। गौरव प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled Lords. All glories to the assembled Lords. All glories to the assembled Lords. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Divim Saraswati Vyasam Tado Jayamudire. Ashtaprayeshu Patreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtihi. Hare Krishna, welcome you all to the Saturday morning Srimad Bhagavatam summary study. We are discussing today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, text 34 up to the end, the second half of Chapter 9. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Swayam Rupadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sridhapadakamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakarjatam Sahana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Samadhitam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahana Lalita Shri Vishakambidamscha हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिकांता राधाकांत नमस्ते तप्तकांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यश्च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत शिव सारि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम राम। We start with text 34. मयि तत् प्रार्थितं व्यर्थं चिकित्सेव कथायुषी प्रसाद्य जगदात्मानं तपसा दुष्प्रसादनम् भवेच्छिद्दम् अयाचेहं भवं भाग्य विवर्जितः। Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. It is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in my case, although I have satisfied the super soul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. My activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who is already dead. Just see how unfortunate I am. For in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. So I will just give a small brief on what has happened so far. As we all know that Dhruv Maharaj went to the forest to perform tapasya based on his mother Suniti's instructions. He performed a lot of austerities in devotional service, and the Lord gave him a lot of benedictions, material as well as spiritual benedictions. So Dhruv Maharaj, after hearing these benedictions, he became repentant because he saw the Lord face to face. Until he saw the Lord, he had a desire for both material as well as spiritual benedictions. But when the Lord fulfilled those benedictions, he was feeling repentant that I asked for the Lord for material benedictions, which are just like pieces of broken glasses. And in the process, when he saw the Lord, he offered very many prayers. So these are some of the prayers that we'll be discussing today. In the first sloka for today, he says that it is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in my case, although I have satisfied the super soul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. So, seeking material benedictions from the Lord is as good as seeking useless things from the Lord. The Lord can actually give much better benedictions than material ones. In fact, there are several quotes from senior acharyas in our movement who say that one who wants to enjoy or one who seeks material benedictions like what Dhruva Maharaj aspired for are like trying to eat stool like a pig. So the point is that material opulences are already destined to us by the Lord. And in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he was already a great devotee of the Lord. So here in this second part of the prayer, he further says, my activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who is already dead. So if somebody is dead, there's no point in trying to give any treatment. So Dhruva Maharaj says that he prayed for these material benedictions, which are just like treatment being given to a dead person. Then he says, just see how unfortunate I am. For in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, one who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. In fact, we are here in this material world because we have a lot of desires. And when Dhruv Maharaj saw the Lord, he felt that he could have rather asked the Lord to stop him from the cycle of birth and death, but rather he has asked for the same conditions again because Dhruva Maharaj wanted a kingdom much bigger than even what his great grandfather, like Lord Brahma, had. So that's why he feels that he was very, very unfortunate to ask these benedictions from the Supreme Lord, whereas he could have asked the Lord to stop him from the cycle of birth and death, which is what is very, very important, because we are here in the cycle of birth and death and we are trapped into it. So seeking further material benedictions makes us only bound into the cycle of birth again and again, and aspiring for this stool of a pig in every birth. Uh, Sometimes in the purport, Prabhupada mentioned that sometimes it so happens that a devotee engaged in loving service of the Lord desires some material benefit in exchange for the service. But this is not the proper way to discharge devotional service. I mean, out of ignorance, sometimes a devotee may do so. So it is good that if we can repent, because it is said that repentance is a very vital factor in the process of devotional service. Because many times, as practicing sadhakas, we also might make many mistakes. Like in this case, Dhruva Maharaj felt repentant that he asked for material benedictions. So it is good, like here, Dhruva Maharaj regrets his personal behavior for having sought these material benedictions. So repentance is a good part to help us progress in devotional service. Whereas the Lord here in his case could have severed his tie from the cycle of birth and death. Text number 35. So text number 35. Swarajyam yacchato maudhyan mano me vikshito bata ishvarat kshina punyena falikaran ivadanaha. Translation Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Because of my state of complete foolishness and paucity of pious activities, although the Lord offered me his personal service, I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity. My case is just like that of a poor man who, when he satisfied a great emperor who wanted to give him anything that he might ask, out of ignorance, asked only a few broken grains of husked rice. So here this is also another very important sloka where Dhrumana says that I prayed for you. It was due to my complete foolishness and paucity of pious activities. It's very difficult for a person to become a young devotee at a very young age. So though Dhruva Maharaj was already predicted to be a great devotee of the Lord, he admits his humility by being completely foolish. And he also says that he might have not performed a lot of pious activities. So out of his foolishness and out of stopping these pious activities, he says that the Lord actually gave personal service. So what is very important for each and every one of us is that rendering personal service to the Lord is much more important than asking for material benedictions. So here he further says that I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity instead of personal service. So rendering services to the Lord is our ultimate constitutional position. But in the process of rendering service to the Lord, actually the Lord knows what is suitable for every living entity, what is desiring to be able to what is desired by this every living entity, and what is suitable to him. The Lord knows because the Supreme Father, he owns everything. Why can't he give everything to everyone? Because he knows, as the Paramatma seated in everyone's heart, by giving this opulence, so and so person may utilize it in the service of the Lord. By giving this so and so opulence, he might rather get entangled into material cycle. So here he says that it was my foolishness that I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity in the process of rendering instead of asking for devotional service. So many times it also happens that we see that many devotees, particularly in the sadhaka stage, they practice render devotional service, but at the same time they seek material name, fame, and prosperity, which is what, in fact, my spiritual master, His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, also mentioned in one of his course that it is like eating the stool of a pig. So then he further says, my case is just like that of the poor man who, when he satisfied a great emperor who wanted to give him anything he might ask, and out of ignorance asked only a few broken grains of husked rice. So the example is again that when a poor man satisfied a great emperor wanted to give him anything that he would ask for. But what happened? That poor man asked for a few grains of husked rice. So when we ask for material benedictions from the Lord in the process of rendering devotional service, it is just like asking for some grains of husked rice. Rather, we should always pray to the Lord that we be always engaged in devotional service, which is our constitutional position. That constitutional position will never change. and that it is only in this human form of life that we can understand the importance of this constitutional position. There are some important points in this purport also. There is a point about complete independence that is mentioned. Generally, conditioned souls want to be independent from the Lord. That is the reason we want, because we want to be independent. The Lord has given this little bit of freedom of independence, but the real independence of a living entity comes by understanding that every living being is a part and parcel of the Lord, and he, by depending on the Lord, he becomes rather independent, because when we depend on the Lord, then the Lord takes care of us completely in every respect, in terms of material or spiritual activities. So, but whereas by becoming independent, uh, we can never be independent, because that is our constitutional, not our right situation. So, example is given, just like a child, sometimes he wants complete independence. So the Lord gives him some small independence in the form of a reflection of a real truth. Sometimes the child might ask for the mother for a moon by seeing the moon, and the mother might give a small ball saying that this is the moon. The child might get carried away. But the independence of the conditioned soul uh, comes in the form of Maya. So if we ask for independence, the Lord definitely will give that also. But by constitution, there is a servitorship in all of us, and that servitorship is render service to the Lord. Either you render service to the Lord, or you render service to Maya. So the Lord gives us that independence and also gives Maya. This is what is called struggle for existence. So real independence is to be reinstated in the service of the Lord. And the example is given that anyone who goes back to the spiritual world, they are freely offering service to the Lord. And that is what is complete independence, not by rendering service to Maya in this material world. And it is by our misconception that we think that we are becoming independent in this material world. We can never become independent. Uh, Example is given that many great political leaders have tried to establish independence, but somehow or other we also depend on others. If you look at even a country like USA, they seem to have a lot of wealth and etc., but still they depend on oil from Arab countries. So the point is that one can never become independent. One has to be dependent either on Krishna, or they have to depend on so many other living beings, maybe living entities or countries or even demigods. But then the thing is, one can become independent by taking up the service of the Lord, because the Lord provides. And the more we try to become independent, the more our dependence also increases. And also, Srila Prabhupada mentions that one can never be happy by trying to become independent. Another important point is that Dhruva Maharaj regrets, because he wanted material opulence and prosperity greater than that of his grandfather, Lord Brahma. So he's begging from the Lord, was like a poor man asking some pieces of broken rice. The conclusion is that anyone who is engaged in the loving service of the Lord should never ask for material prosperity from the Lord, because the Lord knows what the living being requires for utilizing in the service of the Lord, and the Lord provides that accordingly. If you take the example in the Shastras, Sudama Brahmana was a very poor man, and his wife persuaded him to go and ask the Lord. Sudama Brahmana was not at all interested. But then, when he came back home, he saw that his whole house was turned into in a very opulent thing. So, because the Lord awarded him this, because the Lord realized, the Lord knew that Sudama will not misuse it, and they both utilized everything in the service of the Lord. So, pure devotees ask the Lord only for the privilege of serving Him. So, if we have got a privilege to serve the Lord, that is the greatest blessing that we can get from the Lord. That is our real independence. And Srila Prabhupada clearly confirms that if we want anything else then it is only our misfortune. So we create our own misfortune by asking the Lord for any material benediction. The Lord will give that, but then we will always be bound in the cycle of birth and death in this material world. Text number 36. The great translation. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, persons like you who are pure devotees of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can offer liberation and who are always attached to the honey of his lotus feet, are always satisfied in serving at the lotus feet of the Lord. In any condition of life, such persons should remain satisfied. Such persons remain satisfied, and thus they never ask the Lord for material prosperity." So Maitreya Rishi continues and he tells Vidura that those who are, he gave the example of Vidura himself, saying that devotees like Vidura, Vidura is compared to a personification of holy places, because wherever he goes, Vidura is a great devotee of the Lord. Wherever Vidura travels, that itself is said to be a holy place. So he is addressing that persons like you, who are the pure devotees of the lotus feet of Mukunda, because the Lord is known as Mukunda. Mukunda is the one who can give liberation. But liberation is not the ultimate goal, which we'll discuss a little later, because that sloka is also coming. And these devotees like Vidura, they are always attached to the honey of the lotus feet and are always satisfied in serving at the lotus feet of the Lord. Now, honey is very, very sweet. So comparison is given to the honey, and devotees are always satisfied in serving at the lotus feet of the Lord. In any condition of life, such persons remain satisfied, and this they never ask the Lord for material prosperity. So pure devotees of the Lord are such that uh, in any condition of the life, they only want to serve the Lord, and they don't want to ask for any material benedictions. Some important points in the purport. Uh, Srila Prabhupada mentions about how the Lord is the supreme proprietor, he is the supreme enjoyer. Everything belongs to the Lord. Supposing that we think that I have this one, so a property or anything that we have, asset that we have a tendency that we should make use of it for our own sense enjoyment. But actually, everything belongs to the Lord, and everything is meant to be utilized in the service of the Lord, and ultimately the Lord is the supreme enjoyer of everything. And the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasa Sarvaloka Mahesham, that he is the supreme enjoyer. So everything belongs to him and everything is meant to be enjoyed by the Lord. And in the process of offering these to the Lord for him to enjoy, we also become enjoyed and we also get some pleasure out of that, instead of trying to enjoy for our own sense gratification. So Srila Prabhupada mentioned that if one knows these things perfectly, then he becomes satisfied. That's what the Sloka Bhaktaram Yajnatapasam also says. So if we understand that the Lord is the supreme enjoyer, then we also become satisfied. On the other hand, if we think that we have to enjoy, then we come into distress. So a pure devotee is one who does not hanker after any kind of material prosperity. Karmis work day and night to improve their economic conditions. Jnanis, they undergo a lot of severe austerities in order to get liberation. But ultimately, liberation is not the ultimate goal. Liberation is only a stage where one becomes free from the cycle, free from sufferings. But beyond liberation is what is called our constitutional position, that is serving the Lord. So liberation does not take us to that stage. The jnanis also undergo a lot of austerities. The yogis, they do a lot of austerities and they try to attain mystic powers. But a devotee is one who is not interested in any of these activities, because all these powers, opulences like mystic powers or liberation or material prosperity, keep us only bound in this material world. Whereas the Lord's lotus feet are compared to saffron, the dust of the saffron. Saffron is very, very expensive and supposed to be very uh, uh, good in its fragrance. So Lord's lotus feet are compared to saffron dust. And a devotee is one who is always wants to engage in drinking that honey that is coming from the lotus feet of the Lord. So unless and until one is free from this, all these material desires, Srila Prabhupada mentions that one cannot relish the taste of the honey from the Lord's lotus feet. So as long as one has got material desires, one might render devotional service also, but one will not be able to taste that uh, nectar that comes out of rendering devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada further mentioned that one has to discharge his devotional duties without being disturbed by the coming and going of material circumstances. So material circumstances are such that the Lord himself has stated as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is Dukkhalim Asasvatam. And in spite of all these things, someone has to keep continuing his devotional service in spite of whatever the situation may be. This desirelessness for material prosperity is what is called nishkama. So we cannot be desireless, but we can always desire for rendering service to the Lord, which the Lord is also very pleased to give. Uh, Generally, many people tend to think that nishkama means giving up all desires, but that's not the right way. The right understanding is that we are all eternally part and parcel of the Lord. We cannot give up desires. That is the nature of the soul. So, whereas a living entity can always uh, request the Lord so that he may be engaged in the service of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada makes a very strong statement. Everyone of us has an arrangement for our standard of material comforts. So that means whatever we are to receive, that is already destined by our own self from the previous life. So a devotee should be satisfied with whatever standard of comforts that are offered by the Lord. So this is a very important point. So Dhruva Maharaj repented for this. Then we go to text number 37. Here, the translation is, when King Uttanapada heard that his son Dhruva was coming back home, as if coming back to life after death, he could not put his faith in this message, for he was doubtful of how it could happen. He considered himself the most wretched, and therefore he thought that it was not possible for him to attain such good fortune. So Dhruva Maharaj was 5 years old when he went into the forest to perform austerities. So when a messenger came to King Uttanapada to say that Dhruva Maharaj is coming back, actually Uttanapada thought that Dhruva Maharaj already left his body because he was very young and he thought that he might have already been dead. So when the messenger came and mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj is coming back, he did not believe at all because he thought, what is it? There is no chance because he's already lost his son. And if at all he has to come from the kingdom of death, that is from the Yamaloka. Then this is not possible. This is how he was contemplating. But then, how could he be so fortunate to get back his lost son? So Uttanapada laments now for having been the cause of Dhruva Maharaj's departure from his home. Till now, now we see so far that Dhruva Maharaj was lamenting for asking for material desires. Now we will see that Uttanapada was lamenting, uh, and Surichi also actually had caused so much pain to Dhruva Maharaj. And at that time when Surichi spoke some harsh words, Uttanapada in fact kept quiet because he had more affection to his second wife, Surichi. So uh, Uttanapada's repenting also comes at the right time. So Uttanapada was also a great devotee of the Lord, but somehow, because he was carried over he got carried over with his second wife's affection, he ill-treated Dhruva Maharaj. So Uttanapada also starts repenting. So this is the beginning of this verse. So that is how Srila Prabhupada mentioned that this is how a devotee should respond very maturely. And if we misuse, again it is mentioned that we must always repent. That is the best way to act properly. So Dhruva Maharaj was actually angry and agitated, and he approached Suniti, his mother, real mother Suniti. At that time, Suniti also told Dhruva Maharaj, you should not harbor any pain for someone who has caused this pain to you. Maybe there is some past karma. So Suniti also tried to convince Dhruva Maharaj that you should not have any wrong uh, vengeance attitude towards your stepmother. Maybe it has happened due to your bad karma. So Suniti was also burning in her heart, but she acted very, very maturely at that stage by giving proper instructions to Dhruva Maharaj. And the most important instruction that Suniti could give to Dhruva Maharaj was that ask him to approach the Supreme Lord. After all, there is no other shelter for anyone other than the Lord. So her devotion to Krishna inspired her to give the right advice to Dhruva Maharaj, which came in properly at the right spur of the moment. So there is a mention that even Uttanapada was a great king, but somehow he made a great mistake. That's why it is mentioned that one should be very careful in terms of his relationship with, in the course of one's interaction with other devotees, because sometimes we might act in a way which might not be proper. So one should be repentant for that. Text number 38. Although he could not believe the words of the messenger, he had full faith in the word of the great sage Narada. Thus, he was greatly overwhelmed by the news, and he immediately offered the messenger a highly valuable necklace in great satisfaction. So, Uttanapada did not believe in the words of his messenger. But still, what had happened was Narad Muni had earlier predicted itself that one day Dhruva Maharaj will come back. So, when this messenger gave this news to King Uttanapada, immediately he was very pleased with the messenger, and he honored this messenger by giving him a golden necklace. Text number 39 and 40. Translation. Then King Uttanapada, being very eager to see the face of his lost son, mounted a chariot drawn by excellent horses and bedecked with golden filigree, taking with him many learned Brahmanas, all the elderly personalities of his family, his officers, his ministers, and his immediate friends. He immediately left the city. As he proceeded in this parade, there were auspicious sounds of conch shells, kettle drums, flutes, and the chanting of Vedic mantras to indicate all good fortune. So Uttanapada went along with all the ministers and etc., all the close relatives, in a grand manner to receive Dhruva Maharaj. And both Suniti and Surichi also went along, and along with Uttama also was present in that. Text number 41. And there was a grand reception that was arranged for receiving Dhruva Maharaj, Maharaj with a lot of Vedic chanting of Vedic mantras, playing of kettles, flutes, etc. Text 41. Both the queens of King Uttanapada, namely Suniti and Surichi, along with his other son Uttama, appeared in the procession. The queens were also seated on a palanquin. So both Uttanapada's wife, that is Suniti and Surichi, and the other brother, son of Surichi, that is Uttama, they also accompanied in the procession with King Uttanapada. So there is an important point here that is mentioned in the purport. It said that after the departure of Dhruva Maharaj from the palace, king was very much afflicted. But by the words of Saint Narada, he was partially satisfied. So King Uttanapada also felt very much afflicted by his behavior, previous behavior. But when Saint Narada predicted that Dhruva Maharaj would come back, at that time he was partially satisfied. Then he could understand the great fortune of his wife Suniti and the misfortune of Queen Surichi. For these facts were certainly opened the palace. So that means earlier he had he had ignored his first wife Suniti, and gave a lot of importance to his second wife, that is Surichi. But after the incident happened that Dhruva Maharaj left palace, and he started repenting that it was out of his ignorance that he ignored Smriti, and now that Dhruva Maharaj was returning, he could understand, he acknowledged Mother Suniti out of his compassion, that she was not only a great mother, but she was also a mother of a great Vaishnava. He also took his second wife Surichi also, and her son Uttama also in the same palanquin. So that was the greatness of Mother Surichi, Queen Suniti. Now, Surichi, it is said that actually discriminated between her son and Dhruva Maharaj, but Suniti did not. Suniti was equally equipoised between both her son Dhruva Maharaj and Uttama also. So Suniti said that you worship the Supreme Lord, but Surichi said that you worship the Supreme Lord, then you have to take birth in my womb, and then you can sit in your father's lap. So this is how Surichi, and the difference between Suniti and Surichi. Suniti asked Dhruva Maharaj to approach the Supreme Lord when he was in distress, but Surichi told Dhruva Maharaj that you first worship the Lord, come back, take birth in my womb, and then you have a right to sit in your father's lap. That means she told Dhruva Maharaj that he should die and take birth in her womb. But Suniti did not have any negative attitude to Surichi. Instead, they were all traveling together to receive Dhruva Maharaj. So the another example as to how in Ramayana, Kaikeyi could not tolerate Ram sitting in the throne. So she finally took a call to send Ram to go to exile and ask Bharat Maharaj to sit in his place. There is a mention that Suruchi means that which is very tasty but will cause some problems at a later stage. That means initial stage, Surichi means it is very, very tasty, but later will cause problems. Whereas Suniti means that which is not palatable in the beginning, but ultimately that is glorious. So a definition of their names is also given. So Suniti means that which is not palatable, maybe bitter in the beginning, but later it becomes glorious. So these meanings are also very, very meaningful. These names are also very, very meaningful. Text number 42 and 43. Upon seeing Dhruva Maharaj approaching the neighboring small forest, King Uttanapada with great haste got down from his chariot. He had been very anxious for a long time to see his son Dhruva, and therefore with great love and affection, he went forward to embrace his long lost boy. Breathing very heavily, the king embraced him with both arms, but Dhruva Maharaj was not the same as before. He was completely sanctified by spiritual advancement due to having been touched by the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the point is that Dhruva Maharaj, when he saw the Personality of Godhead, he also was free from all the contamination of material desires that he had. Not only that, the Lord touched his head with a conch shell by which he became completely purified. And that is how then he started offering these prayers to the Lord. So Uttanapada was very, very happy going and trying to embrace Dhruva Maharaj. But Dhruva Maharaj was very much satisfied with the type of service that spiritual advancement that he made in the process of performing devotional service to the Lord. He was completely purified and as also was completely satisfied. Text 44. Reunion with Dhruva Maharaj fulfilled King Uttanapada's long cherished desire, and for this reason he smelled Dhruva's head again and again and bathed him with torrents of very cold tears. So when Uttanapada embraced Dhruva Maharaj, tears started flowing out of their eyes, and there's a mention of how torrents of cold tears. So in the purport, there is a point that is given that by nature's way, when a man cries, there may be two causes. One is when he cries in happiness upon the fulfillment of some desire, the tears that come are very cold. That means when we are happy, sometimes we may tears. For example, in this case, we see Dhruva Maharaj was considered lost, but it was a very happy situation that he came back. So at that time, the tears that come out of a happy situation are cold, whereas when tears come out of one's eyes at the time of distress, is mentioned are very hot. So this is the difference of tears which come out of one's eyes, whether in distress or in happiness. Text number 45. Then Dhruva Maharaj, the foremost of all nobles, first of all offered his obeisances at the feet of his father and was honored by his father with various questions. He then bowed his head at the feet of his two mothers. So Dhruva Maharaj also then, after embracing his father, he offered his obeisances to he bowed his head at the feet of both the mothers. Now, here it is mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj offered his respect not only to his own mother, but also to his stepmother, due to whose insults he had to leave home. So it was Surichi who insulted him, but still Dhruva Maharaj offered obeisances to her. And the answer is given that after achieving perfection by self-realization and seeing the personality of Godhead face to face, Dhruva Maharaj was completely freed from all contaminations of material desire. So Dhruva Maharaj became purified of all the desires, material desires, when he saw the personality of Godhead. Further, there is a mention that feelings of insult or honor in this material world are never perceived by a devotee. That means, though Dhruva Maharaj was insulted by his stepmother, but still, Dhruva Maharaj, when he came back, he offered his obeisances to his stepmother, Surichi. Lord Chaitanya therefore mentioned that one has to be humbler than the grass. Uh, he recommends that one should be more tolerant than a tree to execute devotional service. That's how devotional service works. So Dhruva Maharaj therefore was considered one of the most noble personalities. And the pure devotee is considered the noblest of all, and he has no feelings of animosity towards anyone. So, in the process of our day-to-day activities, also many times interactions happen which create frictions. But then a pure devotee is one who does not consider ill feelings to others. Text 45. Then Dhruva Maharaj, the foremost of all nobles, first of all, yeah, finish. Text 46. Suruchi, the younger mother of Dhruva Maharaj, seeing that the innocent boy had fallen at her feet, immediately picked him up, embracing him with her hands, and with tears of feeling, she blessed him with the words, "My dear boy, long may you live." So, as soon as Dhruva Maharaj offered himself and at the lotus feet of his second mother, stepmother Surichi, immediately she also felt repentant, and she picked up the boy and embraced him. And with tears coming out of her eyes, she also blessed the Dhruva Maharaj, saying, "My dear boy, may you live for a long time." So this is how Suruchi's attitude also changed because of the devotional service of Dhruva Maharaj. Text 47. Unless one has transcendental qualities due to friendly behavior with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities offer honor, just as water automatically flows down by nature. So the point is that when one renders devotional service, a lot of transcendental qualities automatically manifest because of association with the Supreme Lord. And the example is given that water automatically has got a tendency to flow down by nature. So here, Srila Prabhupada mentions that why Suruchi, who was not at all favorably disposed before, now she blessed him, long he may live. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that since Dhruva was already blessed by the Lord, due to his qualities, everyone was bound to offer him all the respects and benediction, just as water flows down by nature. Because Dhruva Maharaj was already blessed by the Lord, that change in attitude in Surichi automatically came, just as water flows downwards. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada stresses that a devotee does not demand respect for anyone, but wherever he goes, he is already respected by everyone throughout the whole world. So Srinivas Acharya, one of the Acharyas in our this thing, he mentioned that the six Goswamis of Vrindavana are respected throughout the universe because they are being devotee. They please the Supreme Lord. And thus everyone offered their respects to them. Text number 48. The two brothers Uttama and Dhruva Maharaj also exchanged their tears. They were overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love and affection. And when they embraced one another, the hair on their bodies stood up. So when both Uttama and Dhruva Maharaj embraced themselves, they also were um, in ecstasy, and in the process their hairs stood up. Text 49. Suniti, the real mother of Dhruva Maharaj, embraced the tender body of her son, who was dearer to him than her own life, and thus forgot all material grief, for she was very pleased. So Suniti, Dhruva Maharaj's real mother, embraced Dhruva Maharaj, and then she also had all her grief mitigated and became very, very happy. Text 50. My dear Vidura, Suniti was the mother of a great hero. Her tears, together with the milk flowing from her breast, wet the whole body of Dhruva Maharaj. This was a great and auspicious sign. So there are some important points here. So the points is that when deities are installed, they are normally washed with, we say panchamrita, panchavya, with milk, yogurt, and water, etc. That is what is called abhisheka. So here the emphasis is given that when uh, Suniti embraced, automatically tears started coming down from her tears, which were all very auspicious. So a sort of an abhisheka was performed by his mother in the form of tears on Dhruva Maharaj. Now this abhisheka ceremony is being performed by his mother. That was an indication that Dhruva Maharaj would occupy the throne of Maharaja Uttanapada. Another important point is that Suniti, uh, Mother Suniti is addressed as a mother who produced a great hero. There's a important Sanskrit word called Verashu. That means she's a mother who produced a great hero. There are many heroes, but there is no comparison to Dhruva Maharaj, who was not only a great hero in this planet, but also a great devotee. So a devotee is already a great hero because he conquers the influence of Maya. This is an important point Srila Prabhupada mentions. Another example given is that when Lord Chaitanya inquired from Ramananda Raya about the most famous, there is a long conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Raya and Chaitanya Charitamrita, from which an important point is picked where Ramananda Raya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Raya, who is the most famous person in this world? And Ramananda Raya replied that anyone who is known as a great devotee of the Lord is to be accepted as the most famous. That means when one becomes a devotee of the Lord, then automatically he is the most famous. Text 51. The residents of the palace praised the queen. Dear queen, your beloved son was lost a long time ago, and it is a great fortune that he now has come back. It appears, therefore, that your son will be able to protect you for a very long time and will put an end to all your material pangs. So, all the residents, they praised Suniti, that she undertook a lot of austerities, and now that Dhruva Maharaj is back, that she will also be honored as a great lady because of Dhruva Maharaj. Text 2. Dear Queen, you must have worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who delivers his devotees from the greatest danger. Persons who constantly meditate upon him surpass the course of birth and death. This perfection is very difficult to achieve. So the residents are also admiring Suniti for her devotional service, because of which Dhruva Maharaj uh, uh, was begotten into her womb as her son, who also was a great devotee of the Lord. And because of Guru Dhruva Maharaj's devotion, even Suniti's position became exalted. And she is also honored as a great lady because of Dhruva Maharaj. Text number 52, 53. There's one important point that in the 52 says that the Lord was worshipped by both mother and son, and both were able to achieve the supreme benediction from the Supreme Lord. That means Dhruva Maharaj actually sought material benediction, but Suniti was already a great devotee of the Lord. So when Dhruva Maharaj came back, The devotional service performed by both mother and son was so much had so much distinct that they were able to achieve. Her mother also got the supreme benediction from the Lord. Though Dhruva Maharaj sought that benediction, but it is mentioned that her mother also got the benediction when Dhruva Maharaj came back. So Dhruva Maharaj was not only saved by personality of by the Supreme Lord, but he was blessed with the highest perfection. Text 53. The sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, when everyone was just praising Dhruva Maharaj, the king was very happy. And he had Dhruva and his brother seated on the back of a she elephant. Then he returned to his capital, where he was praised by all classes of men. So both Uttama, Dhruva Maharaj and Uttama, they were returning back to the capital, the same palanquin. Text 54. The whole city was decorated with columns of banana trees containing bunches of fruits and flowers, and betel nut trees with leaves and branches were seen here and there. There were also many gates set up which were structured to give the appearance of sharks. So there was a grand decoration, a reception that was organized for Dhruv Maharaj's reception in the city. And on by going also on the entire passage was decorated route was decorated with a lot of fruits and flowers. Text 55. At each and every gate, there were burning lamps and big water pots decorated with differently colored cloths, strings of pearls, flower garlands, and hanging mango leaves. So there were so many gates that they had to pass through, and at every gate, there were a lot of nice, colorfully decorated cloth, pearls, and flower garlands, etc. Text 56. In the capital city, there were many palaces, city gates, and surrounding walls, which are already very, very beautiful. And on this occasion, all of them were decorated with golden ornaments. The domes of the city palaces glittered, as did the domes of the beautiful airplanes which hovered over the city. So the entire reception was done very well all through the route. Uh, it is mentioned that regarding the airplanes, demigods also have their own. We see an airplane here flying in the sky. It is said that the demigods also have a system of airplanes, and the demigods came all the way to bestow the blessings to Dhruva Maharaj when he arrived at the capital. Srila Prabhupada mentions that during Dhruva Maharaj's time, the airplanes were all made of gold, whereas nowadays we see the airplanes are made of aluminium. So that it gives an indication of what was the opulence that was existing during Dhruva Maharaj's days and the poverty of the modern times. So the opulence during those days was very extraordinary. Nowadays we use plastic and flex, etc., for whatever that is the condition of Kali Yuga. Text 57. All the quadrangles, lanes, and streets in the city and the raised sitting places at the crossings were thoroughly cleaned and sprinkled with sandalwood water, and auspicious grains such as rice, barley, and flowers, fruits, and many other auspicious presentations were scattered all over the city. So all these grand arrangements were made to receive Dhruva Maharaj. Text 58 and 59. Thus, as Dhruva Maharaj passed on the road, from every place in the neighborhood, all the gentle household ladies assembled to see him, and out of material affection, they offered their blessings, showering him with white mustard seeds, barley, curd, water, newly grown grass, fruits, and flowers. In this way, Dhruva Maharaj, while hearing the pleasing songs sung by the ladies, entered the palace of his father. So, all through the Dhruva Maharaj was received by all the citizens everywhere with nice opulent paraphernalia like barley, curd, water, fruits, and flowers. This way, Dhruva Maharaj entered the palace. Text 60. Dhruva Maharaj thereafter lived in his father's palace, which had walls bedecked with highly valuable jewels. His affectionate father took particular care of him, and he dwelled in that house just as the demigods live in their palaces. in their higher planetary systems. So this pastime took place in the earthly planet, but Srila Prabhupada mentions that how the demigods live in the higher planetary systems in a very luxurious way. Similarly, Dhruva Maharaj stayed in his father's palace in a very opulent manner. Text number 61. The bedding of the palace was as white as the foam of milk and was very soft. The bedsteads were made of ivory with embellishments of gold, and the chairs, benches, and other sitting places and furnitures were made of gold. 62. The palace of the king was surrounded by walls made of marble, which with many engravings made of valuable jewels like sapphires, which depicted beautiful women with shining jewel lamps in their hands. So there is a description given on the decorations that were made in Dhruva Maharaj's palace. Srila Prabhupada mentions as to how, yeah, Dhruva Maharaj ruled for 36,000 years. So that means he mentioned that he must have lived in Satya Yuga, where people lived for 100,000 years. And then there's mention as to how in Treta Yuga people lived for 10,000 years, Dwapar Yuga for 1,000 years, and Kali Yuga, of course, people are destined, are supposed to live for 100 years, but with the advancement of civilization, the day by day, the lifespan is also reducing. So Dhruva Maharaj's pastime actually could have taken place in Satya Yuga. So it is mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj lived many millions of years ago, but the description of the palace of Dhruva Padaras is so glorious, we cannot accept that human civilization did not exist even 40 or 50,000 years ago. So the time that Dhruva Maharaj performed the pastime took place, it was a very, must have happened in Satya Yuga. That is why everything was very, very opulently available. And he said that walls were already decorated with gold and etc. Marble and decorated with jewels, which Srila Prabhupada actually mentioned that during the British, they took away all the jewels and dispatched it to the British Museum. Another thing is that there were all decorations made of jewels, marble, silk, gold, and silver. So there's a specific mention that advancement of economic development was not based those days on big motor cars. So those days, the common mode of transport were the horses. So cars does not necessarily indicate advancement of civilization, but rather dependent on natural wealth and natural food, which is supplied by Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what we require is not artificial transportations like cars, etc., but natural wealth like food, etc., natural food. Another important point that is mentioned is that Dhruva Maharaj's father, Uttanapada, would very soon give up attachment for his palaces and would go to the forest for self-realization. So that is how in the years, kings never used to be staying in the palaces eternally. They used to go back to the at the later part. They used to enter into the forest, particularly at the Vanaprastha stage, for the purpose of self-realization. Text number 63. The king's residence was surrounded by gardens wherein there were varieties of trees brought from heavenly planets. In those trees, there were pairs of sweetly singing birds and almost mad bumblebees, which made a very relishable buzzing sound. So, trees were brought from heavenly planets. There is another example in Srimad Bhagavatam wherein Parijata, Krishna brought Parijata tree from the heavenly planets to please Satyabhama. So, similarly, in the case of Dhruva, it is mentioned that a lot of trees were brought from there. one point that is mentioned is that the heavenly planets are known as Amarloka, where the death is very much delayed because people live there for 10,000 years according to the calculation of the demigods. So demigods used to have normally have a very long lifespan, and there are mentioned in the scriptures that normally, like we have birth, death, birth, uh, old age, disease, and death. In the case of demigods, they have instant death. That means they don't have a long period of disease, etc. Rather, at the time of death, they leave their body immediately. This is how the demigods live in the heavenly planets. And there's a mention demigods live in the heavenly planet for months, years, and thousands of years, according to their time. As the people lived there for 10,000 years, so also the trees. So just like the demigod used to live for say 10,000 years, so also it is said that the trees also had a lifespan of 10,000 years. And Srila Prabhupada mentioned even here on earth, there are trees which have a lifespan of 10,000 years. Not to talk of trees on heavenly planets. Text number 64. There were emerald staircases which led to lakes full of variously colored lotus flowers and lilies, and swans, karandavas, chakravakas, cranes, and similar other valuable birds were visible in these lakes. So it is mentioned that the palace was surrounded by compounds and gardens with very many varieties of trees. There were many man-made lakes also, where the water was fully filled with colored lotus flowers and lilies, and there were nice staircases to get down into the water with which were decorated valuable gems and emeralds. So the atmosphere of the city was very healthy and beautiful. It can be just simply imagined by us by description of this. Text number 65. उत्तानपादो राजर्षिः पभावं तनयस्य तं श्रुत्वा दृष्ट्वा भूततत्त्वममुं प्रपेदे Vishmayam Param. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The saintly king Uttanapada, hearing of the glorious deeds of Dhruva Maharaj and personally seeing also how influential and great he was, felt very satisfied, for Dhruva's activities were wonderful to the supreme degree. So when Dhruva Maharaj was in the forest executing his austerities, actually his father Uttanapada had already heard about everything regarding his wonderful activities. So though Dhruva Maharaj was the son of a king and he was just only 5 years old, he went to the forest and performed his executed severe austerities in devotional service. Uh, so therefore his acts are all very wonderful. So when he came back, naturally because of his spiritual qualification, he became very popular amongst the citizens. So Dhruva Maharaj attained the spiritual qualifications by the severe austerities he performed in devotional service. So when he came back, he became very popular amongst the citizens. So there is a mention that he must have performed very wonderful activities by the mercy of the Lord. And no one more else other than one's father will be more happy with that, hearing the glories of such a great personality. So his father is also credited because of the glorious activities of Dhruva Maharaj. And there's mentioned that Uttanapada was not an ordinary king, he was a Raja Rishi. That means earlier years, the kings were all Raja Rishis. They were known as Raja Rishis because they were king, at the same time Rishis, saintly personalities. So he was not an ordinary person. And formerly, this earth was ruled by one saintly king only. Kings were trained to become saintly. That means the kings of the yesterday years were not just kings for the namesake, but they were all very well trained to be kings. And their only concern was welfare of the citizens, no other concern. And if the head of the government is saintly, certainly the citizens also become saintly. So if the king sets a right example, which Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yagyat Atharashveshwas. So all these heads of the governments are supposed to be setting a right example. And if the government is saintly, the king is saintly, the government is saintly. Therefore, the citizens also become saintly, and everyone lives a very happy life, both because both their spiritual and physical needs and hankerings are satisfied. So everyone has got both spiritual and physical hankering, but when everyone practices devotional service and becomes saintly, then everyone becomes satisfied. So the most important thing is the king has to be a devotee of the Lord. Then the citizens also can become devotees of the Lord, and everyone can be happy in their spiritual as well as physical situation. Text 66. When after concentration, King Uttanapada saw that Dhruva Maharaj was suitably mature to take charge of the kingdom, and that his ministers were agreeable and the citizens were also very fond of him, he enthroned Dhruva as the emperor of this planet. So earlier days, it mentioned that it was a monarchical government. It was also autocratic form of government. And from here, it appears that King Uttanapada, a Rajarishi, was also a Rishi. But before installing his beloved son Dhruva Maharaj, he consulted his ministerial officers and took the opinion of the public also. So it is not that King Uttanapada straight away installed Dhruva Maharaj. He consulted all his ministers in his this thing, and not only that, he consulted the public also before installing him and personally examined Dhruva Maharaj's character. Then the king was convinced that Dhruva Maharaj is the ideal person to be installed as a king, and he installed him as to take charge of the affairs of the world. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that when a Vaishnava king like Dhruva Maharaj is the head of the government, the world becomes very happy. That is not possible or to describe or even imagine. Of course, nowadays we might not see kings like Dhruva Maharaj, but then when we have a king like that, the whole world becomes happy. Then there's even now, if people would all become Krishna conscious, the democratic government of the present day would be exactly like the kingdom of heaven. So if all become Krishna conscious, they would vote for persons of the category of Dhruva Maharaj. So if everyone takes up the Krishna consciousness, they would always vote for a personality like Dhruva Maharaj. And if the post of a chief executive were occupied by such Vaishnavas, all the problems of satanic government would be solved. So today, most of the governments are based on satanic beliefs and in number of problems all over the world. Whereas if devotees take up the position, then the people can be happy. There's further mentioned that unless people are Krishna conscious like Dhruva Maharaj, there will be no appreciable changes in government, because people who anchor to attain political position by hook or by crook cannot think of the welfare of the people. So nowadays we see that people run after the other, but to attain that position in the political arena, they want to attain that somehow or other by crook, by hook or by crook. They cannot think of the welfare of the people. They are only busy to keep their position of prestige and monetary gain. They have little time to think of the welfare of the citizen. So we see that earlier there used to be monarchy, now we have democracy. So what happens that there is change of government every 5 years or something like that. So somehow those who sit in the seats, they want to grab these position by hook or by crook. And by the time they think of doing something for the welfare of the citizen, it's already 5 years over. And they don't have any time to think also of the welfare of the citizens. Text number 67. After considering his advanced age and deliberating on the welfare of the spiritual self, King Uttanapada detached himself from worldly affairs and entered the forest. Yes, there are some important points. One is that the king was Raja Rishi, which I already mentioned. King Uttanapada was very, very opulent and was a great emperor of the world. And these attachments that he had were also very great. All the opulence that he had were also great. But modern politicians are not great as kings like Maharaja Uttanapada, because the moment they get some political power for some days, they become so attached to their positions that they never retire. So we see that politicians never retire from their positions these days. They want to somehow stay at that position. unless they are removed by the post by cruel death or killed by some opposing party. So we see that many times all over the world, the politicians are shot dead. Unless and until they are shot dead, they generally don't want to relinquish their positions. It is within our experience that the politicians in India do not quit their positions until death. This was the practice in the olden days. Immediately after installing his worthy son Dhruva Maharaj on the throne, he left his home and palace. And so the moment the Uttanapada installed Dhruva Maharaj on the throne, he immediately left his palace to the forest. And there are many examples of such kings in the Shastras. So as Dhruva Maharaj practiced austerity in his early age, his father Maharada Uttanapada in his old age also practiced austerity in the forest. So the way Dhruva Maharaj practiced austerity in the early days, his father Uttanapada entered into the forest and practiced austerities at his later stage. Srila Prabhupada mentions in modern days it is not possible for anyone to give up home and go to forest to practice austerity. But if all of them, people take to Krishna conscious movement and practice the simple austerities of no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and no meat eating, and chant Hare Krishna mantra regularly 16 rounds, by this practical method, it would be a very easy task to get salvation from this material world. So Srila Prabhupada mentioned that if one takes the the people in general take up to the Krishna consciousness, by observing the 4 regulative principles and chanting the minimum 16 rounds, then it would be easy for everyone in this material world to get salvation. So before I conclude the class, one of the most important conclusions in this Dhruva Maharaj pastime is that in the case of, in most of the other cases, we see that Lord takes away the opulence at the right time from the devotees of the Lord to ensure that they don't have any attachment to their opulences and they completely surrender to the Lord. But in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, the Lord took away his material opulence in his early stage and then finally awarded him also opulence at the end of, so that he could rule the kingdom as a devotee of the Lord. So this is one very significant difference in the case of Dhruva Maharaj and all the other important personalities in Srimad Bhagavatam. So when Dhruva Maharaj was deprived of all his opulence, he had an opportunity to take shelter of the Lord and then perform austerities and devotion service and came back again as a devotee of the Lord. By which what happened was that even there was a significant change in the attitude of his stepmother uh, and all the citizens in general. This was the importance or significance of Dhruva Maharaj's devotional service. With this, I conclude the class for this session. Anyone has got any questions or comments, they can ask me for the next couple of minutes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Yes, Mataji. Tell me.
We just take home a good message that we need to follow spiritual master, like how Dhruva Maharaja followed Narada Muni
Yes.
and reached his ultimate goal.
Yes.
So all glories to Srila Prabhupada to enlighten us with this information and knowledge. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Mataji. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranam. Pranam to everybody assembled.
Thanks, Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
You all very much. Grantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna to all devotees assembled here. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.